This film is all about South America, but maybe I better start at the beginning with me, born in Australia, a child of the 1960s.
Was I a cute little baby? My mother thought so.
Both my parents were born during World War II. My mother was born in the Netherlands, my father was born in Australia. My mother had a Latin name, but she was 1/4 Belgian. My father had an English name, and he was 1/4 Spanish. My dad liked rugby, my mum liked reading.
By the way, when I was in primary school, my favourite book was When Tintin Went to Peru.
I have a sister who's 1 year younger than me. Everybody thought we were twins growing up, but we weren't. My dad was a Mr. Fix-It for a major Australian bank, which meant we moved around a lot, from town to town, from school to school, which probably explains why I find it hard to settle down, even now.
One of the towns I lived in had an Aboriginal name which translates as buzzing of a boomerang.
After high school, I worked as an underground electrician, which allowed me to save up holidays and money to travel.
My first big round-the-world trip took me to Europe and North America, and the two countries I liked the most were Spain and Mexico.
In 1987, I won an essay writing competition and won a berth on the First Fleet reenactment voyage. I crewed on this 100-year-old topsail ketch, the Anna Christina. And I can tell you, seasickness is a good way to keep your weight down.
A few years later, I travelled again to Mexico, adding Central America and South America. I started to get interested in learning Spanish. Then heading over to the UK to work on building sites and also the construction of the Channel Tunnel. Back in Australia, I slugged away in dirty jobs, dreaming and saving for the day I could go back to Latin America, which I did in 1998, travelling from Los Angeles, California to Cartagena, Colombia, weathering Hurricane Mitch while in Guatemala. I wrote a book about that, which got good reviews, and parts of it were translated into Spanish and published in a local newspaper supplement. Writing a book was hard work. I didn't get rich from it, but it was very satisfying and it opened a lot of doors for me. I wrote the book while working as an English teacher in Cartagena. I don't have children, but the kids I taught, well, I'm still in contact with a lot of them, and I'm sure they remember me, my boomerang throwing lessons and Vegemite tasting.
Esto sabe horrible!
While in Cartagena, I bumped into Harry Belafonte, President Pastrana, and the guy on the right, he was a fellow teacher who had ridden a motorbike from Patagonia to Alaska and published a book about it. Also during my teaching stint in Cartagena, I was fortunate to host this man, the great Ted Simon, and if you know anything about motorcycle travel literature, he needs no introduction. Back in Australia in 2002, but not for long, I wanted to explore more of this fascinating continent, South America, which I did in 2002-2003. Meeting in La Paz this man, Freddy Alborta, who took the photographs of Che Guevara after he was shot. Later on the same trip, visiting Iquitos, my visit coincided with the final days of shooting of the Motorcycle Diaries, and I was even able to interview Che Guevara's best friend, Alberto Granado. A few articles came out about that trip from the westernmost point to the easternmost point and back up the Amazon. But my appetite was far from satisfied. Back in Australia, I took any job I could get. Here I am spruiking at the Olympic Stadium during the Royal Easter Show. And no, that's not Kylie Minogue standing at the back. One day my brother Adam told me there was an interesting guy to be seen soliciting donations in Sydney Central pedestrian tunnel. Vladimir Yaretz was a deaf mute since an infant, but that and several motorcycle accidents hadn't stopped him touring the world alone on his motorbike. Flights between Sydney and South America are not cheap, but I would go back whenever my budget allowed because I loved meeting interesting people over there. One such character I met in Iquitos. His nickname was Mad Mick. His real name was Michael Collis. He had many pots on the boil, so to speak. A hostel, a fishing tackle shop, a local newspaper, running an annual Amazon raft race, and building the Amazon's first golf course. One day he invited me out to see the clubhouse he was building. The ride was an adventure in itself. These three-wheel moto taxis, they're something to be seen. It's kind of weird being caught in traffic where everything's got 3 wheels and no windows. I'm not a golfer myself, but it was very interesting to see what he was doing out there.
These are the ladies' toilets and shower. Of course, all the light fittings were stolen. They stole all the water pump. They stole it.
That far one, that orange flag, what is it? It's what green?
Number 3. Well, there's a creek in between there. You've got to go over another a little creek.
This iron house sits on the main plaza in Iquitos, in the middle of the Peruvian Amazon. The prefabricated panels were shipped across from Europe, up the Amazon, and assembled here like some sort of giant Meccano set over 100 years ago. Originally they thought it was designed by Gustav Eiffel, but now they're not so sure. They think it came from a factory in Belgium. Back in Cusco, every time I saw a motorbike, I started to think, it's a cheap way to travel. It's an adventurous way to travel. In many parts of South America, they have a festival where they tie gifts to a living tree. Then the guests take turns at swinging an axe at the tree trunk until finally it topples over, and then everybody swoops in a mad rush to grab the goodies. So I flew out of Rio de Janeiro via London. On the way back I decided to take a break in India, a country I'd heard a lot about but never actually been to. I ended up only seeing Mumbai because the monsoon rains came early that year and Goa's beaches were polluted with an oil spill. In my 2 weeks in Mumbai, I was stopped in the streets several times and asked if I wanted to be an extra in movies and TV ads. Within a fortnight, I'd appeared in a couple of TV ads and a movie, Johnny Man, but only as a lowly paid extra. I got to know these guys who informed me you can make a living by virtue of your white face. Back in Sydney, I found rents had skyrocketed and jobs were scarce. So it didn't take much for me to head back to India after only a few weeks in Sydney. Back to Indian thali, which I slowly grew to relish. Back to $2 haircuts. And getting used to crowded trains and little shrines everywhere.
So my life took a very unexpected turn when I found myself as an actor in India, appearing in music videos, TV ads, soap operas, films. I was often just a background extra, but I soon found out you can earn a lot more money if you get a speaking role, but you have to be prepared to wait and negotiate and haggle. And I couldn't speak Hindi, the language that they speak there. Hindi nahi aata hai is the only thing I can remember saying, which is I don't speak Hindi. So that limits a lot of what you can do. I did eventually get approached by a reputable agent and he found me good work. I wasn't a millionaire. I did appear in a few dozen films and had speaking role in probably a dozen or so, but big roles only in about 3 or 4. And they definitely weren't the lead actor. I did get to meet Om Puri in Kismet Connection. He was one actor I'd heard of before I went to India. I did get a speaking role in a Malayalam epic called Pazzhassi Raja, starring Mammootty. That film went on for years. Probably the best film that I would recommend to other people that I was in was a film called Tere Bin Laden. and it was a Pakistani comedy film shot in India, and it was banned in Pakistan, but it was a hit, and it's one of the few films that actually might appeal to Western audiences because it was a comedy film. Most of the films I was in were not commercially successful, except Tara Rampam. That one was a huge hit. I played the doctor in that one. I was often cast as the doctor, the lawyer, the judge, businessman, American, British. Once I was in a film called Hello. I was played an Australian. I got to meet Brett Lee, cricket star, in one film, Victory, and I did get to be in 3 different commercials with the king of Bollywood, Shah Rukh Khan.
But you soon realise, just like Hollywood and LA, Bollywood and Mumbai, there are 2 extremes. One glamorous projection that you see on the silver screen, and the other the terrible reality of destitute poverty that you see in the streets. The suburb of Colaba in South Mumbai became my new home. I soon fell in with a couple of knockabout Aussies that owned Royal Enfield motorbikes.
Oh, Hitler.
Tell us a bit about your bike.
And Germany.
How long have you had this bike?
I've had this bike now 3 years. Bought it in Varanasi, as you can see by the number plates. So it's an old Benares bike.
350.
350. And
how old is it? How old is it?
85, I believe.
85.
85.
Almost as old as its rider.
What? Jesus.
Here comes Harry. Harry, that looks like a Nazi helmet.
Get some riding footage as well.
Riding a heavy old Royal Enfield in Mumbai traffic with a pillion passenger requires some skill, and is best done on a Sunday or a public holiday.
The new seat. The new Harry seat.
Although as a teenager I had ridden a small commuter bike, this was only the second time I'd ever been on a big bike, and I liked it.
Oh, what a gentleman. He's giving her the Nazi helmet.
I think it's a good idea.
Wow, 3 Aussie actors and 1 American actress. Yay!
No, that's an Enfield. No. Oh, it is an Enfield. It's just got fat back tire.
One day Harry and I scored speaking roles in an historical film called The Flag, set during the Second World War in India.
Hi, I'm Harry and welcome to the set of The Flag. Ooh. Cut.
This is actually the second shoot, filmed in the north of Mumbai, some months after the first shoot, which was in Gujarat, a desert state in the north. Everyone is rugged up because it's December and a cold snap came along. Movie sets are often like construction sites, but the high winds wasn't helping anybody.
You'll have no option other than to inform the General. You put a black mark against a great British family name. How's that?
I considered Harry a good friend.
We're going to shoot an old man. You should save your bullets for the real enemy.
And he was, except for the day when he killed me.
You see, I've no other choice than to inform General Shipton of this incident. Traitor!
At least he can say he made a killing during his time in Bollywood. For various reasons, production of the flag stalled for many years, and it changed names several times. Eventually it was released under the name Hamara Tiranga, about 10 years after they started filming. But it was a good film. Harry saw the preview screening and said it gained a standing ovation. It had some well-known stars, and it launched the careers of a couple of others. But it was not a commercial success. And even though it was my biggest role, it's 2021 and I still haven't seen the finished film. That's Sajeev Balath, the director. The bald guy is Harry Nair, whose expertise as director of photography saved the film. There is a tragic footnote to this film. When it was finally finished, many years after it began, and it was promoted behind Sonam Kapoor at the Cannes Film Festival in 2015, Sajeev had died penniless and homeless just a few weeks before. Most of the films I appeared in were box office failures. But it certainly is cool when you get texts from your friends saying they saw your face on the silver screen, even if it did bomb. Still, we were privileged compared to most Indians because of the jobs that we had. And although we were junior artists, we sometimes got to meet and mix with the stars. There's my friend James alongside Om Puri during the filming of Kismet Connection. Plenty of chai and boredom when you're an extra on a Bollywood shoot.
Do you have anything to say, Glenn?
Yes, I do have some lines actually. It's ridiculous.
Is it?
In so many ways, living in India is like stepping back in time. English is widely spoken, but not universally spoken. And don't pay too much attention to the standard of electrics. Statutory warning. Chewing of pan masala may be injurious to health, not for minors. With travel, a typical day in Bollywood can take up to 14 hours. Today I had to head out to Filmistan. Sounds good, but it's actually a bit grimy. Today a bunch of us Goras, which is a Hindi word which means like white foreigner, are doing little one-act ads for Sahara TV. Harry and Simon and a few other Goras were there. I knew all of them from previous shoots.
What, in the mirror?
Yeah, I mean, Times of India, I'm just amazed that Times of India always only has one side of one page for the entire rest of the world. It's got 5 or 6 pages for Mumbai.
Harry was a soldier, I was a detective, and Simon was a vampire.
I want to suck your blood.
Film set in...
Look at those ears, man.
And what happened to Harry just now happened to all of us at some point. Some agency had reused his photos from a previous shoot and not paid him.
It's a full page on page 4 of this month's Images, Fashion and Business, or whatever the hell it's called, some magazine. Not doing any representation for any other shirts when I am. Unpaid.
Your shorts are many.
When's mine? You said I was 4th.
Yours will be after them.
Take the train.
After them.
After the
so
vampire.
why did I have to be here at 9 o'clock?
After vampire is yours.
Of course, we had to check out the bikes in the Filmistan parking lot.
This is a broad area, so if you overindulge on the tallies, you still have a saddle you can sit on and spread your...
The ad hoc way they make movies here, it's easy to see why there's so many accidents with stuntmen, props, special effects. Speaking of vampires, I think I know what they are. What's that say? Spiting person will be fined? Should say fighting person will be fined. The main thing I didn't like about living in Mumbai was the crowded trains. You have to take them, that's the only way to get around, and peak hour lasts nearly all day. If you're lucky and you wait till the end of the night, you might get a seat in first class if you wait late enough. If you don't want to get squashed to death, all you can do is go and have a coffee or a meal and wait till late at night. Ah, there's my chance. These old double-deckers were left by the British over 50 years ago, but the Indians keep them running. Stardust is a good catchphrase, because as you are probably starting to notice, behind all the glitz and glamour, there's a lot of dirt and dust. Haha, I was in the dance scene of that film. Finally back in the Kishan guest house. Sometimes India just overwhelms your senses. Its ancient Hindu traditions mark it apart from all other nations. One positive thing about India was I never felt like I was in physical danger, anywhere in India. That man is Brandon Hill, an established Bollywood actor originally from New York, who took me under his wing. He was kind of like a friend and a mentor. We hung around a lot together. He actually helped me get a few roles. Oh, thanks, Brandon. Harry, Brandon and I and Simon were all cast with speaking roles in an epic historical film called Pazzhassi Raja. Filming took place in southern India, mainly in Kerala. That's natural latex in a rubber tree. And this is the junior artist's changing room. It had a cast of thousands and it took more than 2 years to film.
Ready? Suresh, our pinata recover konja left over overlap irukar. To your left, okay, stay.
The man in the green sash is Mammootty, a huge star in southern India. The biggest star, actually.
Okay, okay.
Please, very important.
There's the director there, Harry Haran. Here's Harry with Texan actress Linda Arsenio. Pazzhassi Raja wasn't strictly a Bollywood film because it wasn't in Hindi and it wasn't made in Mumbai, which is where Bollywood is centred. It was filmed in southern India in the Malayalam language, which means it's a Mollywood film. I tell you what, these stuntmen, they're real daredevils. That guy's not a stuntman, but it's his job to climb up that tree and get down the pulley that the stuntmen were using. But look how high it is. Yes, I'm wearing a wig there and also moustache extensions.
While on the subject of makeup, there's a little anecdote I'd like to share. We were on that film Pazzhassi Raja. We were inside the castle. Well, it was a fake castle. It was a studio castle. And the stars all have their own makeup men that come along with a box. You know, it's got cosmetics and sometimes chewing gum, cologne, you know, cigarettes, whatever. And they're at the beck and call of the star. But we weren't stars. We had speaking roles, but we definitely weren't stars. So we had like one makeup man between about 10 of us. And there was one particular actor who had been around for a while, and he actually spoke Hindi. And when the makeup man came near him, he said, "Don't you come near me." And there was a big argument in Hindi. I didn't really understand what it was about. And we all thought, well, he's a bit narcissistic, a bit conceited, or who does he think he is? But within 3 or 4 days, he had our respect because he knew more than us. Because half of us came down with conjunctivitis because the makeup man dabbed white powder and makeup or whatever and went from one person to the next. And one of those persons must have had conjunctivitis because we all got it. Not all of us, but a lot of us. So there is a reason for having your own makeup man if you can afford it, and it's nothing to do with being stuck up or anything. It's all to do with, you know, hygiene and medicine.
It took more than 2 years to film Pazzhassi Raja. Rain destroyed the sets 2 years in a row, and there were also terrible accidents, one of which killed 2 film crew members. The accidents were blamed on extra heavy monsoonal rains, which also severely damaged the sets 2 years running. In Kerala, the monsoon rains are not your usual type of rain. When it was finally completed, it did go on to win many awards both in India and internationally. The film was a huge hit, especially in southern India, so much so there was crowd control problems of people wanting to get a ticket in the first few weeks. Brandon introduced me to this man, Indian-born Tom Alter, perhaps the most famous white actor in India. He played Gandhi's doctor in Richard Attenborough's famous biopic.
Tom Alter's grandparents were American missionaries, but he himself was born in India, grew up speaking Hindi, Urdu and English, so he was always in great demand whenever they wanted a white actor that could speak those 3 languages. I only met him maybe 3 or 4 times during my stay in India, but he was a perfect gentleman. He was the old type of actor. He didn't have a cell phone. You had to call his secretary who would write it down in a diary and they'd get back to you. He was also very involved in cricket in India. He wrote a book about cricket. He was a sports commentator. He was the first man to interview Sachin Tendulkar on TV. Which sort of connects with the next anecdote I'm going to tell you, my connection with cricket and Bollywood in India.
One day out of the blue I got a phone call asking if I wanted to play an umpire in a cricket film. The casting director remembered me from a few months before I'd been in a movie called Hello. Without much ado, I was booked on a flight and flying to Jaipur in the north of India. Well, from up here you can really see all the smog and air pollution. Is that who I think it is? My mate Simon got a role, playing the Indian team physiotherapist. We got 3 nights in this hotel.
Ooh, this is nice. Very nice. A bit better than the Kishan.
There's even a telephone in the bathroom. I was told to be in reception at 10 p.m.
For me?
A taxi took me to the stadium, but I still didn't know what to expect. But I soon found myself in the same room as the Australian cricket team. It was my first brush with elite athletes.
You know, one thing I didn't anticipate when they did started filming and I was out there in the field was having the cricket balls whizzing past my ears at, something like 100 miles an hour, and guys, batting the ball in my direction. It was a bit scary for a minute. I wouldn't want to be an umpire. No way, not in real life.
That's Darryl Harper, a real international umpire who gave me a crash course in umpiring. That's Dalip Tahil. He was also in Attenborough's Gandhi film. There's Brett Lee, currently the world's fastest bowler, playing the guitar. But that would not surprise Brett Lee's Indian fans, because they all know he did a duet with Asha Bhosle that made number 2 on the Indian music charts. Asha Bhosle started singing at age 10 in the 1940s when India was still under British rule. She has collaborated with people like Boy George and Michael Stipe. Over the last 7 decades, Asha is estimated to have sung more than 12,000 songs and is recognised in the Guinness Book of Records as the most recorded singer in history. But guess which recent song of hers was her biggest hit? Well, actually it's this one, written in half an hour between cricket practice sessions by Brett Lee, the world's fastest bowler. How's that?
Acha Geet, great.
Hello, what's Brandon got to say? Your film is in page 1 of the Bombay Times. And what's Harry got to say? Mafia stopped shooting today. My mum was Oz team physio for a bit.
Both of Harry's texts were true. I know his mother is a physiotherapist to the British royal family, and the bit about the Bollywood mafia, unfortunately, it's all too true. Production houses do their best to avoid dealing with these mafia type people, but extortion, standover men, protection rackets, it's all there, and it's best not to cross them. Speaking of Bollywood mafia, it was during this shoot that Harry sent me a text saying I was missing out on meeting Shantaram. Shantaram's actually a best-selling novel, written by an Australian, which me and Harry had a few things in common with. He was Australian, he liked Royal Enfield motorbikes, and he was a Bollywood extra. But what we didn't have in common with him was he was a convicted heroin addict and serial bank robber who escaped from prisons both in India and Australia, maximum security prison one in Australia.
The novel, which is semi-autobiographical based on his experiences while on the run, sold 6 million copies. A sequel has come out. There were talk when I was there in 2008 of Johnny Depp and Amitabh Bachchan making a movie out of it. I believe now it's on Apple TV. He's certainly done well out of it. And in his book he claims to be both a Bollywood actor and a Bombay mafia bad guy.
If I remember correctly, Harry met him at his local Colaba Royal Enfield motorcycle repair shop, where by all reports he had a couple of very fancy Royal Enfield motorbikes stashed. I did meet Mr. Shantaram later. He gave a free talk at Colaba, more philosophical than anything about bank robberies or prison escapes, so our paths crossed momentarily. But anyway, back to the victory shoot.
By the second night, word had got around amongst the locals that they could see the Indian and Australian teams in a Bollywood film. The crowd is getting restless. Security is worried. It's all the Aussies who are being mischievous, letting off all these fireworks. The crowd has used the explosion to swamp Brett Lee. Security's guarding him. I don't know whether it's because they've had too many beers or because it's so late. All in all, the shoot was a blast, and I had my 15 minutes of fame with Brett Lee. However, the film was a huge flop. The film cost tens of millions of dollars but only recouped about 2%. And Brett Lee later gave an interview where he said he never got paid his appearance money for that film.
Those were the days, back in the Kishan guest house, one of the cheapest in Mumbai. It was full of young, hopeful junior artists, extras, Bollywood wannabes, and we had to stay indoors a lot because monsoon, it rained all day. But we made our own fun, and we didn't forget special occasions like birthdays.
Silence, please. Silence, everybody. Short speech. As everybody knows, it's Harry's 25th today. Really? It's also Sarita's 25th. So first of all, I'd like to give Sarita her present. Who wants it? That's me. A photocopy of my book. Don't laugh, Harry. He who laughs loudest laughs loudest. Because this is my present to you. Is it a photo of you? No! Harry Key, high-flying Bollywood stuntman. Oh, boy. Very good.
Don't crumple that up. Protect it.
The bungee boy.
Have you cleared that up or something?
No, it just came out. That was in focus. That came in focus.
Oh, that's excellent.
To remember you on your days. If we ever finish the movie, it's been a year.
For me looking the sexiest I ever have.
5 rubber checks later, maybe next week we'll go, but at least you've got that to remember.
Very cool.
Can someone help me?
But Mumbai wasn't all glamorous Bollywood movies and parties, especially around February 2008.
It all began when I received this public announcement text from the Mumbai police.
Workers from Raj Thakre, Maharashtra Navnirman Sena had rioted and disrupted a Mulayam rally at Shivaji Park.
The thing is, politics and Bollywood are inseparable in India. The two are very well intertwined and always have been and always will be. And this case, like many others before it, big name actors got their names dragged into it.
And later even hurled bottles at Amitabh Bachchan's residence. Swardi Party's national leader Amar Singh, who is in Jaipur, where he and the Bachchan family have gathered to celebrate Abhishek Bachchan's birthday.
Bollywood is centred in Mumbai, which is the biggest city in Maharashtra, which is a state of India, more or less in the middle of India, but on the west coast. Now, these riots happened because of divisive politicians that sort of played upon ancient ethnic divisions that date back centuries. India, before the British came, was not a single nation, but a series of principalities and kingdoms, and each had its own sort of language, its own script for writing, different traditions, different religions. So this particular politician picked on certain actors from certain ethnic backgrounds and religions even, and that's what caused the flare-up. But most of the actors came out and said, we're not for this divisive politics. Then another catalyst came along with a news magazine that said he was Mumbai's Hitler, which is kind of ironic from a Western point of view because you see the swastika everywhere. It even has the same name, swastik, but it's thousands of years old. and it's a symbol of good luck and prosperity. A year later, he was in the news again, saying that he admired Hitler. So this was my farewell party. There's one A-lister there. You know, I never felt like I was ever in physical danger in India, but all these riots and things, and the fact that my agency contract was about to expire, the flag and Pazzhassi Raja shooting had ground to a halt, I made the decision to leave India.
After a short layover in Hong Kong and Macau, I was back in Sydney. But again, not for long. I was soon heading back to South America on a 1-year return, trans-Pacific intercontinental flight, final destination, Santiago de Chile.
In the next episode, you'll meet two Brits who emulate Che Guevara on vintage Nortons that they restored themselves. I meet them in Cusco, Peru. You'll also see how I made my first 2 documentary films, which were moderately successful. I do return to Asia for a while, have a few adventures there. In Australia, I meet 4 modern-day explorers, but the bit that's probably the most interesting, I do finally take concrete steps towards buying my own motorcycle to do the big trip. Now, if you're into adventure motorcycle videos on YouTube, you might recognise Harry. Harry has his own YouTube channel where he rides around Australia with his girlfriend. It's called Riding on Eggshells. And they were going to go overseas. I think that's been put on hold due to COVID. But it's well worth checking out. Riding on Eggshells.
Gringo Loco asks,
hit the subscribe button.
please subscribe.